Welcome to One-on-One with Walt Laskos. In this brief podcast, you'll learn how to most effectively address senior financial exploitation. Now, here's Walt.
I'm joined today by Dr. Maureen Hannah, PhD. Dr. Hannah is a professor of psychology at Siena College, where she has taught since 1992. She is a licensed New York State psychologist practicing with older adolescents and adults. She is also an advanced imago relationship therapy clinician and serves as an academic faculty member of Imago Relationships International. She serves as the editor of Family and Interpersonal Violence Quarterly and has published 7 books and numerous chapters and articles. Finally, one last note. In 2004, Dr. Hannah co-founded and continues to serve as chair of the annual Battered Mothers Custody Conference. Dr. Hannah, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Let's begin our conversation, Doctor. Given your work, professional practice, and experience, how do you see the stress, anxiety, and anger of everyday life impacting us today?
Yeah, how is it affecting people? Well, profoundly, I would say. First of all, some of us are more sensitive to what's going on around us than others. Not everybody sort of operates quite the same way in the world. Some people are able to compartmentalize more, sort of put things aside. Some people are a little bit calmer. Some people are more reactive, depending upon their nervous system, depending upon perhaps genetics, but certainly depending upon their past life experiences. And what I see a lot of in my clinical practice is people who have a difficult time coping in adulthood often had a difficult time coping in childhood. It's a general rule. It's not 100% of the time, but oftentimes, because children develop their nervous systems, their brains, their personalities around their experiences and how they interpret those experiences. So not everybody reacts to things quite the same way. I see people who are sort of, devil may care, able to kind of put things aside, not take things too seriously or too personally. Sometimes that's a result of just sort of like their constitution or temperament. Other times it's because of the inner work that they are doing. And all of us can really learn to cope better. And that's part of what psychotherapy is all about, and the self-help literature and self-help practices are all about. And I recommend those to people. But the world is not an easy place to be. And in fact, just this morning, I got a call from a family member of a young person in their early 20s who, died by an overdose. An accidental overdose, but the use of drugs in an addictive sense oftentimes is just one of many possible poor coping mechanisms. And so people react, as I've said, to life's difficulties in all sorts of ways. And I think at different times of life, different phases of life, sometimes, the issues become different. So what somebody in their 20s is coping with, often with career concerns, financial concerns, relationship concerns, is going to be different from people in their 60s and 70s, although there certainly is some overlap. And then finally, we're all subject to the background of the politics, the economics, the financial situation, the culture that we are living in. And some of those aspects are really not very healthy. There's a saying that J. Krishnamurti said, and it's something that I put on one of my syllabi in my courses, in abnormal psychology in particular. It is no sign of health to be well-adjusted to a sick society.
Doctor, recently I've spoken a lot about the window of tolerance, which describes the optimal zone of arousal for a person to function in everyday life. When a person is operating within this zone or window, they can effectively manage and cope with their emotions. And for those who have experienced stress and trauma, it is often difficult to regulate emotions, and the zone of arousal where they can function effectively becomes quite narrow. Under those such conditions, though, one can become more susceptible to a scam. So, for those engaging a scam victim, those that are helping, let's say someone who's a teller at a bank or a credit union, how important is it to include an understanding of this window of tolerance, to show empathy, to walk in the shoes of the victim in order to be successful in helping them realize that they are being a victim of a scam? So if you could share your opinion on that.
Yeah. Well, certainly empathy is very important. Okay, I think empathy is an underrated commodity in our culture. I think we live in a generally non-empathic culture, at least at the more cultural level. I think in individual relationships, empathy is key. One of my mentors, Harville Hendricks, who developed imago relationship therapy, said the loss of empathy early in life is one of the greatest human tragedies. And empathy is sort of trained out of us as we are exposed to our culture, and certainly not in everybody. And I think in general, empathy is sort of on a bell curve. Many people have average amounts of empathy. There is a smaller proportion of people that have little empathy, a smaller proportion of people who have more empathy, who are above and beyond. But as far as how to deal with scam victims, absolutely. A scam victim, in some ways, this is the way I think about it. They're a little bit hypnotized by what they've been told in terms of what the scammer is telling them. And so, they're going to believe that, and they're going to want to believe that. They're going to want to believe that what they believe is true. I had a client a while back. I'll disguise the details, of course. A female who became the subject of one of those romance scams. And she was divorced and lonely. And I think she went on, probably it was a dating website. But a man claimed to be somebody he wasn't. To this day, I still don't know who this person is. But he was able to extricate from her tens of thousands of dollars. And I'm talking about an intelligent person. This is not somebody who was she didn't even strike me as unusually naive, although clearly she must have had some naivete. We probably all do in some areas. And so this happens to even intelligent people. And it was essential for me, and it certainly wasn't a difficult task for me because I believe so much in an empathetic approach, to really just support her through it, and for her to be able to acknowledge that she was scammed and she moved on. And, it was like a lesson learned. The thing about things like that happening is hopefully the silver lining is that you learn from it. Nothing's a failure if you learn from it, because that learning is gold. You can't get that from successes. You can only get it from failures or from doing things like being scammed. So hopefully if people go through a scam, they don't give away their shirt, and they learn from it, and they are on guard to not allow that to ever happen again.
When you look at our vulnerability to becoming a victim of a scam attempt, what would you recommend as a remedy to mitigate that possibility? How might we position ourselves to be in our optimal window of tolerance?
You mean to stay in a place where we're not so vulnerable?
If that's even possible.
Yeah. Well, I think people are more vulnerable when they're stressed. Okay. When they're stressed beyond, as you say, the window of tolerance or the window of comfort, the window of vulnerability. And I think that's a little different for everybody. There's a well-known finding. I believe it's still true. It's something I learned a long time ago, that people operate best under moderate levels of stress, not high, not low. So that performance is best when you're under moderate levels of stress. So if you're under stressed, you're not motivated. If you're overstressed, you're distracted, and you don't have complete control of all your faculties. And I think that's probably true in day-to-day life. But I do believe that there's a methodology that scammers use that has probably been studied. I don't know how they studied it, but it can be very effective, where they appeal to certain characteristics in the victim, where they say certain things, where they promise certain things, where they assure the victim, where they try to relate to the victim, even using empathy. They can even use empathy as a weapon. So I think I don't think it's just about avoiding being scammed. I think it's about life in general. I think it's about kind of taking care of ourselves, mind, body, and spirit. And unfortunately, going back to our culture, we don't really have a culture that supports that. I work with many, many couples. I do a lot of couples therapy. Many couples simply, they don't even have time to nurture their relationship. But of course, what I do is I try to encourage them to find that time because it's so important. But when people are, 2 jobs, 2 kids, right, taking care of the house, paying the bills, people get stressed, people get distracted, and then things start to fall apart for some people, okay? It's very hard to keep it together in this culture. We also do not honor older people, okay?
Mm.
In some cultures, some of the more communal cultures of the world, elderly people, older people are even revered. Not so in this culture. So older people are isolated. Older people feel alone. Older people are not, even just financially, many older people live under financial stress. And it's a terrible way to live. We talk about, Social Security. Well, Social Security is taxed, okay? How can that be fair to our older people? People who have paid off their homes are still paying property taxes. You may disagree with me, but those are all stressors on older people, and those are the kinds of things that cause people to be, I think, more vulnerable.
And consider this too, Doctor, when you look at all the talk today about taking away Social Security, those kind of issues, that just compounds that anxiety and stress even further.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think there's many elements, there's many balls in the air that affect how people function, how older people function, and their vulnerability to being persuaded to do things that are not in their best interest.
Would you recommend, knowing this, would you recommend that we all need to try to find time in our day-to-day life where we might, some might say, take a little moment to do some meditation or quiet time, or just to relax?
Yeah.
It kind of helps that balance. Would you make such recommendations?
Oh, I recommend that all the time, to be able to quiet the nervous system, okay? Deep breathing, meditation. There's exercises that you can use to, calm the sympathetic nervous system and turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the sort of like the off switch of our nervous system. And some people have a very hard time doing that. I will tell you that. And I do teach people various strategies to try to calm the nervous system down. So yes, I think, I talk to people, and I think these days it's almost a mainstream part of even medical practice is to talk to people about exercise, talk to people about diet, talk to people about supplementation. Again, those aren't things that are in my wheelhouse because I'm not a physician, but I do recommend those things.
I would say, too, in hearing your guidance and advice, that you would probably most likely agree with me when I advocate that for training people in banks and credit unions that might be dealing with a lot of potential scam victims who come in, that it's so very, very important that we do that training in a way that not only talks about the various types of scams and how they work and what they do, but also how to really, really understand the mental acuity of the individual, as we said earlier, and walking in their shoes. I think that we really need to take a more holistic approach if we're really looking to sincerely help those individuals and protect them from becoming a victim of a scam. So I take it you would absolutely agree with that.
Oh, absolutely. And education is key. I think if somebody has never been scammed before, they are probably more vulnerable to being scammed. Just like if somebody's never been through any difficult experiences in their life, and then they encounter their first difficult experience, they're probably going to have a harder time coping. Because we learn from our experiences, of course, at least most of us do. Sometimes we don't. Some people don't learn from their experience, but most of us do. And that's what I'm saying, that experience can be gold. But I think education is key. I know that the banks these days, when I've tried to make a wire transfer, a very legitimate wire transfer to a relative, they question me quite extensively to make sure it's not a scam. And even though it's a little annoying to be questioned that way, because I'm sending something to somebody I know very well, somebody who's in my family, but I kind of appreciate it because I think that they're, they've taken some learnings that they've gotten from people from customers, or from the general knowledge about scammers and how it operates. People remember people being asked to buy gift cards, and people being asked to wire money. That's one of the ways my client that I mentioned earlier was scammed. Oh, wire me some money and I will pay you back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think people in the know, people who are sort of operating at the level of banks and credit unions and things like that, I think it's good that they can be educators. They can be the ones to try to serve as a hurdle so that these things don't happen.
And Dr. Hannah, before we wrap up, would you please paint a picture of Siena College and the classes you teach? Of course, I naturally need to ask you this since I am a graduate of the college of nearly maybe 50 years ago. So share something about Siena.
Yeah, go Saints. Go Saints. Yeah, you're a saint. Yeah. Well, I love Siena College. And I think most of the people who teach there really do love Siena College. And we love to teach. So when I came to Siena, it's still this way, a little bit less so, but still this way. It's very much a teaching college. The emphasis is on good teaching, on mentoring students, on guiding students, on serving as a role model for students, and having excellence in teaching. And so that is a college that would draw people who really want to teach. On the other hand, virtually everybody that I know of on the faculty also does research, does professional work, as I do, publication, various kinds of professional development activities. And we have many incredible faculty on our staff at Siena College. The students are wonderful. I've always loved the Siena College students. There's a certain ilk to the Siena College, typical Siena College student. They're sincere. Many of them come because their parents are alumni, or because they come from Catholic families and they want to go to a Catholic college. And there's a certain ethic at Siena that I really enjoy, which is, really empathy and care for the earth and care for other people, and the ethics of St. Francis. And that's one of the things that drew me to Siena in the first place. Things have changed a little bit over the years. The whole higher education field has experienced some shifts in demographics, and maybe to some degree in the students who are applying. But nonetheless, it's a wonderful place. It really does try to be very much a good community member. We do a lot of things in the community. There's a lot of departments or offices at Siena where students are guided into doing community outreach, community service. I actually run a course called the Psychology Internship, and the interns serve at various community agencies, educational, even North Colony Central Schools. We have interns, psychology interns there. Interns at places like Unity House, which is a domestic violence shelter, and various other places that give the student firsthand experience in to some degree in the mental health field. I'm a mental health provider, I'm a clinician, and I'm a clinical psychologist as well as being a professor. So my emphasis in my courses is always the clinical aspects of psychology. So I teach courses like abnormal psychology, which is a very core course within the field of psychology. But I teach that. I've taught that my entire career. Courses. I teach a course that I developed many years ago called Intimate Relationships, which is about couple relationships. And interestingly, especially at the time I developed the course, there are very few courses on college campuses on intimate relationships. And it always puzzled me because our intimate relationship, our marriage, who we choose to marry, who we choose to have kids with, probably, if not the most important decision you're going to make in life, one of the most important decisions. And with such a high divorce rate, high breakup rate for cohabiting relationships, something's missing. Mm-hmm. And we don't learn how to be in a partnership. We don't learn that. We don't learn it in school. Where do you get that information? Where do you get that knowledge? Where do you get that know-how? Well, we don't. When we look to our parents, sometimes they have a good marriage and sometimes they don't, and we learn the wrong stuff. So I developed a course that teaches all about relationship dynamics, the nature of attraction, what makes marriages work, what makes marriages fail. And I also teach a course called Counseling Theories and Techniques, which is very, very basic skills in counseling, the psychology internship. I teach a course at times, a seminar course called Trauma and Recovery, because I've done a lot of trauma work. I continue to do a lot of trauma work, and I treat people who have traumatic experiences. And the trauma-informed approach is very much, sort of like a model in the field that is now very much appreciated and revered.
Dr. Hannah, you have one busy schedule, but I think it's so wonderful, and you're to be commended for all the work that you do and the education, the guidance that you partake to the students, to the community. And most especially, thank you for taking time today to chat with us and to give us guidance and understanding of dealing with anxiety and stress in our lives, and particularly how it impacts older adults and keeping them safe from financial scams. Thank you for being with us.
I really do appreciate it. Well, thank you for this wonderful interview, for being a great interviewer, and for all the incredible work you are doing on the behalf of your community.
And thank you all, too, for listening. Be safe.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to follow One-on-One with Walt Laskos wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to send comments to walt@laskoscommunications.com. And to learn more about how you might support the prevention of elder financial scams, visit laskoscommunications.com.